So I've been using the Schlage Sense and the Kwikset Premis on my own home for 6 months now, and I can definitely tell you that I like the Premis better. I've come to this conclusion after using the locks in my own home for over half a year. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about both locks in terms of installation, battery, well, longevity we'll say, operation, security, and the app. And I'll end it all off with why I wouldn't get either one of these products if I wasn't reviewing them, you know, just to balance this entire review out. So let's get started. At Smart Home Reviews, Monty and I base all our reviews on actual usage in our actual home, which means we get to deal with these devices in real life. And I'll be honest with you, doing smart home gadget reviews is actually pretty tough. I thought it's actually way tougher than doing gadget reviews for like smartwatches and smartphones, because if I don't like a case on my iPhone, I just stop using it until I decide to do the review. But with the smart home gadgets, I only got one home. So if I put a lock or a product that I really don't like, I have to suffer through it in my own home, which kind of makes these reviews a lot harder to do. When it comes to installation, I generally didn't have any issues with either lock. I'm not a terribly handy person, so as long as you can follow numbers and pictures, you'll be fine. Both products include a plethora of metal pieces, plates, and screws that may seem daunting at first when you open the package, but all those extra parts are there to ensure that the lock fits whatever door you have. For example, both locks include different latches depending on how the bolt on your door is cut, and adapters for different sized bore holes. Now, the door I installed the locks on is an older door, so my family wasn't too fussed about messing around with it. The front door is a different story, but one of the things I had to consider was the size of the actual lock. My back door has a large window, which reduces the working area I have around the deadbolt. This means I can't use the August smart lock on this back door. Now, the older door also is a bit sticky, as the weather stripping on the door is a little too thick, I think. Again, not handy, so I have no idea. But during the spring and summer months, it's actually quite hard to lock the door. It's not too bad during the winter time. I actually have to press very hard against the door in order to lock it. Neither of these locks will work well if your door is like mine. Now, both locks you can access using Siri through Apple Home, or if you buy the external attachment kit for the Schlage Sense, you can have it work with Amazon Alexa. Now, I'm not terribly impressed with using voice assistants in smart home gadgets. You can easily ask Siri or Alexa if your back door or front door is locked, but that's really about how useful it gets. Last thing I will talk about when it comes to installation is the actual size, and if you look in the video clips, you'll definitely notice that the Premis is bigger than the Schlage. Now, both locks are powered by 4 AA batteries, and both locks will work like a dumb lock without batteries, if you're wondering. The Kwikset came with a pair of Rayovac batteries, and the Schlage came with Duracells. Again, your mileage for the batteries will depend on how often you use the lock. For the Kwikset, I got the low battery warning after about 6 months of usage, and even after the batteries apparently went dead to 0%, I was still able to get the notifications that the lock was being used. In terms of operation, both locks, as I mentioned above, will work like a dumb lock. In general, you'll get into the house quicker if you've got the Schlage Sense lock. To lock the door when you're leaving, all you have to do is push the Schlage symbol and walk away. To unlock it, all you have to do is punch in your code. There are lights behind the number that light up the moment you press the screen, or if you're running home, you can do all this through a geofence and have the lock automatically do whatever you need it to do when you leave your home. There's nothing fancy about operating the deadbolt from inside the house. One of the odd things I did notice was this rubberized Schlage looking button on the inside of the lock. It doesn't do anything when you press it, but I feel like I should push it every single time I see it. It actually lights up for the alarm portion, for the security portion, which I'll touch on next. The Kwikset Premis has a glossy cover, and the keypad actually turns on and off, so it takes an extra step to actually activate the lock. Because of the glossy cover, the Premis requires you to enter in 2 random numbers before punching in your code, and this is actually a security feature to ensure that your fingerprints are spread out all over the entire touchable surface rather than just, your code. If you get any one of these products, the first thing you'll notice is how noisy they actually are. They aren't quiet, and it's weird to hear your locks make noise. You'll definitely know that someone is accessing the door remotely or through the keypad. The Sense is much quicker than the Kwikset, which might not make a difference on a day-to-day basis, but if you get annoyed by small things like this, and I kind of do, or listening to the grinding noise of the door work all the time, then yeah, maybe go with the Sense. So just out of curiosity, which sound would you prefer? The slow grinding noise of the Kwikset Premis, or the, we'll say, snappy loud pop of the Schlage Sense? I personally would probably go with the Schlage Sense in terms of sound. The last thing I will talk about in terms of operation of the lock are the keys. The Premis comes with a smart lock tool which basically allows you to rekey the lock, I think a KW1 lock, to work with existing keys. It boggles my mind that the Schlage didn't include this with their lock. Even if I was to get 2 Schlage locks, I would end up with 2 keys, whereas with the Premis, I could rekey one lock, so I only have to use 1 key. Schlage does offer a rekeying manual, but it's labeled professionals only. And again, I'm not handy. It looks incredibly involved, and it requires me to buy this toolkit that has all these tiny teeth in it. Now, if you've been keeping track, I give way more hat tips to the Schlage Sense than I do to the Premis. The biggest differentiating factor for me is the ability to rekey a lock. I don't like carrying more than 1 or 2 keys. If I could just boil everything down to 1 key, that would be great, but I can't do that with the Schlage Sense. I'm ultimately hampered having 2 keys, because if I was to put 2 locks, well, one on the front, one on the back, I got 2 keys. But I guess I could go pay a locksmith to rekey it. But then I should just go buy the Premis, because that's just a feature that's built into the product. On to security. Both these locks have a kind of built-in alarm into them. Both of them will sound an alarm after 3 incorrect codes. The Schlage Sense is much louder than the Premis. The Premis just beeps a lot, whereas the Sense, it really makes it sound like it's a annoying car alarm that's on a Honda Civic owned by a teenager. Now, one of the things I was expecting to see was notifications through my home app that was telling me that there was a bad attempt at entering my home, but yeah, that doesn't happen, though the bad access does show up in the corresponding app's histories for both products. Between the 2 products, the Sense might have a tiny hair up, only if you really need to hear when your door opens or closes, which gets annoying after a while. Now, for the apps for both products are quite simple, and you'll really only end up using the apps to manage the passcodes. Both products allow you to add up to 30 codes to the lock, as well as time restrictions on those codes. Now, Kwikset goes one step further by allowing to set self-destruct codes after a certain time limit, which might be handy for some people. It's always nice to have that feature, I guess. As I've said throughout this entire review, I like the Kwikset Premis over the Schlage Sense, but the reasons for liking it are almost inconsequential. If you don't care about carrying more than 1 or 2 or 3 keys, then get the Schlage Sense. If you want something that's cheaper, get the Schlage Sense. If you want to have a code that destructs after 24 hours, then you can go with the Kwikset Premis. But overall, if you were to remove all those features on a side-by-side comparison, the Schlage Sense would be a little better. So both are smart locks. Both, in my opinion, do the job decently. There isn't one that's completely awful. The thing you have to consider, though, is that if you need a new lock, then by all means consider getting one of these smart locks. But if you're looking just to upgrade your existing lock that just works, I'll be honest with you, after about 3 months, my wife and I, we just started locking the doors regularly. It was easier in our minds to do that than to punch in the codes, do everything remotely. I just had my first kid, and a lot of people are visiting and staying, for days at a time just to go meet my son. And it is easier to them, like, older people like my parents and my wife's parents, to give them the key than it is to explain to them how to use the smart lock. But my question to you is, how do you justify spending that much more money to use a product that's going to annoy you on a day-to-day basis for those marginal extra features? Right? We're not talking 50, 60 bucks. We're talking $200 to $300, and you're going to be annoyed by this product on a day-to-day basis. But if you're moving into a new home and you wanted something, then yeah, maybe consider getting a smart lock. But I really want to illustrate how marginal the usefulness of these smart locks actually is when it comes to using a lock on your home door. Now, I can totally see being able to remotely access or remotely monitor my lock being useful, more useful as my son gets older. He doesn't move. Yeah, I put him down, he sits, and he just stays, right? So, as he gets older, and he starts getting a little more curious about the world around him, being able to know that my door is locked or unlocked or was unlocked, or, being able to hear it or being able to lock it before he gets to the door, may be useful. If I lived in a house where I'm very, a lot of people come in and out, being able to give just the code and be able to remotely manage those codes might be useful. The last thing I will mention is that the Sense is the only one that works with Alexa, and you have to spend, I think, 60 bucks to buy a Wi-Fi adapter. And that is, to me, the laziest, stupidest thing that Schlage could do. It's a money grab in my opinion. Release another product with the Amazon Alexa hardware built into it. But to keep selling a lackluster product now because it's not completely compatible with Alexa and forcing Amazon Alexa users to buy a Wi-Fi adapter is a dick move in my opinion. Just my opinion. So that's kind of all I got for this review. If you have any questions, leave them down there in the comments section below. First time you're watching one of my smart home reviews, subscribe. Again, it's very difficult to do these reviews and they take a long time. But again, I use these products in my own home for quite a while, 6 months between these two products. So whatever review or comparison I do, you know that it's going to be worth watching. So do click subscribe. That's kind of all I got.